welcome to Chaos Tournaments. Today we'll be going over a deck breakdown of Captain Sisay with the winner of Chaos 7, Choirboy. So, Choirboy, why don't you tell us why you decided to bring this deck?
Yeah. I wanted to bring Captain Sisay for, I guess, three reasons technically. One, I think the deck is very heavily underrated and it's very consistent. Like just being able to tutor for the perfect Stax piece at the right time through Captain Sisay, or just skyrocket your mana production with Gaia's Cradle, or assemble infinite mana combos that then you can still find an outlet through Captain Sisay. All of those are really strong things that the deck can do. So I valued its strength. I also am a little sentimental about the deck. Captain Sisay is literally the first Magic card I ever owned, and the first CDH deck that I ever built. So I wanted to kind of give the list some more refreshing tournament success in this year if I could. And reason number three was primarily just that people still badmouth Sisay. A lot of people still think that Paradox Engine was like the only thing that made her viable, but I don't really think that's true anymore. A lot of the legendaries that have been printed in the last year, like Ashaya Soul of the, or in the last couple of years, like Ashaya Soul of the Wild, Kogla the Titan Ape, Emil the Blessed, Elishnorn Mother of Machines. A lot of those things kind of bring her back into competitive viability, I think. The primary thing that you want to be looking for in no matter what pod you are in is you want a hand that is going to take relevant game actions quickly. Depending upon the pod, if you're against like really fast turbo ad nauseum strategies or something, you're looking for some of your early stacks pieces like Draneth Magistrate to stop Underworld Breach. You're looking for Thalia Guardian of Thraben to stop some of the rituals and mana rocks. Similarly, finding stuff like Collector Oof or an early Karn the Great Creator to shut off mana production. You generally just want a hand that is going to take relevant game actions quickly. In another example, say you're in like more mid-range pods with like Thrasios, Timna, and like something with Tavish Shot. Those pods are usually a little bit slower, so you then prioritize things like landing an early Sisay, so that way you can find the right stacks pieces for whatever the game needs. Say you need a Linvala Keeper of Silence, so Thrasios doesn't draw a million cards with the Seedborn Muse in play, or if you're up against something like Dockside Extortionist deck that just wants to abuse Dockside as much as possible, like Corvold, for example, you can get Sisay in play early and then tutor for Yusharan and Placeable Earth, which stops the sacrificing of the treasures. And other than that, you just want to establish your stacks pieces pretty early, according to the demands of the pod. Just kind of focus on the way that the game progresses for a little bit, and you can either pivot to your own combo win through the legendaries that can assemble infinite mana that we're going to be talking about in a second, as well as just kind of generally interacting with the game as it progresses. Having a tutorable Beseiju who endures, or a Ganjo Seed of the Empire also can help with some instant speed tricks that Captain Sisay can do better than other decks in the format, because other decks can't just instant speed, tap the commander, and now you have Beseiju for the Underworld Bridge that's in play.
So why don't you walk us through some of the combos that you have in this deck?
Yeah. So this deck actually is on 10 different infinite mana combos.
Wow.
But yeah, it's a lot. The nice thing, though, is that almost all of them have the same moving parts. So, all three of the infinite mana combo legendaries that we're going to be referring to are Ashaya Soul of the Wild, Emil the Blessed, and Kogla the Titan Ape. All 10 of the infinite mana combos use one of those three. And there's the combos that can combo with all three of them are Magus of the Candelabra and Hope Tender. Both of these creatures are humans, so you can bounce them to your hand with Kogla. They can do stuff with a Gaia's Cradle or a Nykthos that produces a bunch of mana in order to really skyrocket your progression further and further ahead. But in the cases with Ashaya and Kogla and Emil the Blessed, you can find ways to either infinitely untap themselves and a Gaia's Cradle or Nykthos with Ashaya in play, as they are now lands and can untap themselves. You can also use them to untap Gaia's Cradle or Nykthos and then flicker them with Emil the Blessed. So if you have Concordant Crossroads or Thousand Year Elixir, they allow them to activate their abilities again as though they had haste. So any of the haste enablers plus Emil the Blessed and Gaia's Cradle also allows them to make infinite mana. Same thing with Kogla the Titan Ape, although you have to bounce them to your hand and then recast them, you still need the haste enabler, but just the fact that those can go infinite with any three of the combo legendaries makes them generally the most compact infinite mana packages. So then we start getting variations off of that of like Ashaya Soul of the Wild and Quirion Ranger with a haste enabler, or Ashaya Quirion Ranger and a mana dork that taps for at least 2 green, or even stuff like Kamal Fist of Ka0s, Emil the Blessed, and Gaia's Cradle makes infinite mana, because you use Kamal to turn the Gaia's Cradle into a creature, you use Emil to flicker the Gaia's Cradle, and when it comes back, it's untapped and no longer a creature, so you tap it for mana again, and then as long as it's producing at least 5 mana, then you get to just keep doing this and generate infinite mana off of your primary infinite mana outlet in Kamal Fist of Ka0s and another one of the legendaries. And the last combos that we really want to talk about are based around Village Bellringer, and there's one more with Destiny Spinner and Emil the Blessed, and a Gaia's Cradle that taps for like 8 mana, but that one doesn't come up as frequently. But the Village Bellringer lines, if you flicker Village Bellringer with Emil and you have creatures that produce at least 4 mana, then you can generate infinite mana and infinite untaps that way. And you can also bounce the Village Bellringer to hand with the Kogla as it is human, and then replay it. So if you have things that generate at least 6 mana, then you can generate infinite mana and infinite untaps that way as well. There's also 3 combos to draw the deck. So after you make infinite mana and you get infinite untaps with Sisay, you can tutor for Selvala Heart of the Wilds, and then you can either use Ashaya Soul of the Wild, who 99 times out of 100 will be the biggest thing in play, and will be able to trigger the Selvala to draw a card. Then you can tutor for Emil the Blessed and flicker Ashaya, and then whenever Ashaya re-enters, you get to draw a card. So you just do this infinitely, draw your entire deck, and from there you can loop spells infinite times with Endurance or Eternal Witness. You can extort the table infinitely with Blind Obedience. You can destroy every single permanent your opponents have in play, and just go to pass to their next turn with like a Godfarer statue and a Thalia in play, and a Ranger Captain of Eos that you can just constantly get back from Yisan verse to 3, I guess, and just crack it in everyone's upkeep until you get to your next turn and then kill the table.
And now for some further questions.
So the first thing that stands out to me about the deck, though, is
I'll be handing it over to
you've
our
got about
resident
a million
Stax expert
moving parts
and
ways to win
Stan,
the game here.
Kuma.
You know, and you know a lot of them overlap, which is quite fantastic. Can you get me into your thought process around that a little bit more?
So the main thought process is all of the outlets except for technically Blind Obedience are legendaries. So if you can generate infinite mana, and almost all of the infinite mana combos also generate infinite untaps of all of your creatures. So you get to untap Sisay and then tutor for a legendary that will be your infinite mana outlet. Blind Obedience is the only non-legendary infinite mana outlet, but Blind Obedience I think is just generally a good Stax piece anyway. It shuts off things like Kiki-Jiki combos and Dockside Extortionist combos, because it makes everything enter tapped. It substantially slows down your opponents, and God forbid somebody playing Turbo Naz, you slam a turn 1 or turn 2 Blind Obedience, and then they go, alright, I'm going to Naz. Well, here's all my mana rocks, but they enter tapped because of this Blind Obedience, this stupid 2-mana enchantment, and I'm at like 3 life, so they're gonna cast 2 spells, and then I'm gonna die to my Mana Vault being tapped on my upkeep.
Exactly. Living Plane. I got a fun relationship with this card myself. When Marath Will of the Wild was on the database, I had the list, and I like to use Living Plane with Marath to kind of pick off people's lands for 1 mana. And I also did the Linvala and the Elesh Norn thing. So I gotta say, I love it here. Is this basically just, if I draw it, I guess Sisay taps and then my opponents don't get lands anymore? Is that basically the idea here with that?
It is both a lock piece with the Elishnorn, Grand Cenobite, and Linval, Keeper of Silence, like you'd mentioned. But also it can lead to some really interesting and like creative game states as well. I forgot to mention Living Plane is also part of an infinite mana combo in this deck, where if you have Living Plane, Thousand Year Elixir, Gaia's Cradle, and Meal the Blessed, you can just flicker the Gaia's Cradle, and it will be a creature from Living Plane, and just keep doing that as long as it has haste from the Thousand Year Elixir. You can make infinite mana that way, and then you just start flickering your Sisay. She comes in untapped, tap her, go find your Combo Fist of Krosa, and murder the table. But yeah, the primary reason why it's in there is because it is part of the locks with Linval, Keeper of Silence, and Elishnorn, Grand Cenobite. But it does have some additional utility as well. Basically, if I ever draw it, I go, okay, well, now I just need one Sisay tutor for Linvala, and I win the game.
I'm not gonna lie, I was reading through the list going, okay, this looks like a pretty good Sisay list. Okay, we're using the Shy Alliance. I got the Living Plane and was like, sold. There it is. That's my card. I like that a lot. Let me ask you something like this, though. Something about the gameplay.
Yeah.
So what is appealing to me looking at this list, you can tell me how accurate of a picture of the deck this is you have the ability to play a pretty good Stax game. But the thing that was really appealing to me when I started messing around with this list a little bit was the Goldfish on this was actually pretty good. Like, you could get some turn 3, turn 4s, not all the time, but a lot of the time.
Yeah, so generally when in my goldfishing experience as well, the deck tends to goldfish around turn 4 if you're not prioritizing stacks like at all. If you're in like those really grindy mid-range or stacks heavy pods where somebody lands like somebody else lands a Thalia early and you're like, all right, neat. I don't have to care about staxing out the table now. I can just purely focus on combo. And a lot of the time it will goldfish around turn 4.
Let's see here. So something else that stood out to me looking at your list. So as a Stax player myself, I would say most of the losses come from somebody removed a piece, right? You've played Stax long enough, you know how to build decks, you know how to mulligan to the point where you can have a Stax piece or a tutor or something in your hand most games. So when I started realizing that most of my losses came from people removing my stacks, I started putting Mother of Runes, Giver of Runes, and now Skrelv, who just happens to be legendary, in pretty much every Stax deck I run. I noticed you run none of those cards, not even the legendary Skrelv. Can you talk me through a little bit maybe why not?
Yeah, so the reason why I was originally running Mother of Runes and then Mother of Runes and Giver of Runes. Then Skrelv was printed, but I'd already removed the Giver and then had just removed Mother of Runes as well. Because what I noticed is that with all of those cards, they take a turn of delay in order to be able to protect your stuff, because they all require tapping. So unless you have a Thousand Year Elixir or Concordant Crossroads, they can't defend your pieces the turn that they come into play, and they actually can instead just create kind of a target on your back going, oh, if we don't remove this now, we're never going to remove this. So I actually saw that a lot of the games where I was playing Mother of Runes and Giver of Runes, I noticed that I was actually losing a disproportionately higher number of those games. Instead, I decided to focus on effective table talk and also just my best game plan for if somebody tries to remove one stacks piece is just layer more and more stacks on top of it. So either more stacks or more protection. So even though I'm not on a lot of the protection effects that stacks decks are tending to play to prevent the interaction with their board state, I decided to instead focus on keeping the stacks in play through just being a smart player and convincing the table, as well as just strangling them more and more with other forms of stacks rather than casting creatures that take a turn to activate.
Yeah, I gotta say, every time in a Stax deck I have the option between like playing something that staxes the board or something that maybe like furthers my mana development or card development, I feel like every time I don't play the Stax piece, I pay for it. Like, you'd be surprised how many Stax pieces a table can remove in a hurry sometimes. And I do want to talk to you a little bit about playing Stax in tournaments. So, the meme is you can't really play Stax in tournaments except for Winota, because you can't close the games out fast enough. So how do you handle that? I know Sisay can put a faster clock on people than a lot of Stax decks, but what are your thoughts about Stax in tournaments and people taking their time and slow play and time limits and all that good stuff?
So a lot of that has really come to a head with the recent development in tournament rule sets, both with Ka0s and Mox Masters and I don't remember if Tier 1 Con was doing these with some of their tournaments as well, but the fact that a lot of the tournament rule sets have changed to longer extensions in time, but then no turns after the round timer is called. That can present a lot of issues with Stax decks, especially if they can't turn the corner from locking the game down to actually winning the game quickly. So, as you had mentioned, Winota is like kind of the chief example of the Stax deck that can win quickly because while it's staxing you out, it's also pressuring your life totals. Captain Sisay works a little differently in that you can still try to kill the table as fast as Winota does, but through primarily different outlets. Like, you are trying to make the infinite mana, and if you make infinite mana, then you can just tutor for Kamal, Fist of Krosa, make everything infinitely large with trample, and murder the table. The issue with a lot of these Stax archetypes in tournaments, like you mentioned, is primarily opponents taking a really long time to figure out what they're going to do.
Or
So,
not do.
or not do. Uh, so recently, I've been a lot more adamant about players trying to play quickly because we are all on a time crunch, and your chances to win only go up if you can make your decisions quickly. So, especially if somebody is taking a long time on their turn, I would like it if we could progress the game, please. We all don't want to sit around here for an extra 5 minutes. I've had a couple of tournament rounds go at a time just because players can be a little bit slow on it, and like, I have the win on the next turn, or like, if I get to untap, I just win the game. But just kind of like staying attentive to the table and making sure that game actions are proceeding and that things are continuing to move along in timed rounds is probably the most important thing, as well as just being able to play a Stax deck that can actually win the game somewhat consistently. Because if you play a Stax deck and then you're taking 5, 6, 7 turns to end up finding your win, you're going to struggle a lot more with the time constraints.
And that's pretty much all my questions. Anything else you'd like to say, or any questions you wish somebody would ask you about the deck?
I love the questions of what do you do when you're not just trying to continue staxing out the board, and what do you do when you don't draw or like the game's not right for the combo pieces. Say that somebody lands a rule of law or something, or there's another Stax deck in the pod that's slowing everyone down. How do you keep ahead of them? My favorite example is if there's a Winota in the pod and then Winota lands any kind of rule of law effect, I'm like, all right, neat, I've won this game. I don't care that Winota's on the table. I'm gonna tutor for Kogla the Titan Ape, fight Winota, and then next turn tutor for Emil the Blessed, and then I can just keep activating Emil on Kogla as many times as I want. And Winota is never staking on this table, but all of Winota's Stax pieces that I want to allow in play will.
Just when I thought I couldn't love this deck more, you just told me how to exactly crush probably my least favorite deck with it.
Oh yeah,
I love it.
I also love against the like really heavy board dependent decks like Winota, or some decks like Yisan, or I don't know, any Thrasios Tymna with like a million mana dorks and a Seedborn Muse or something. Urza's Ruinous Blast has been very, very key in that you're just like, all right, well, I've got like 3 legendary Stax pieces. I'm just going to activate Sisay. Here's this Urza's Ruinous Blast, cast it. Now it's your
freaking
problem.
luck. Yeah. Yeah, that's always a fun. That's not legendary. Yes, it is.
It is a legendary spell.
Legendary sorceries. What kind of nonsense went on in 2015?
Basically, just the more legendaries get printed, the better this deck gets, and
yes.
I love that. I love that so much.
Thank you so much for coming on. Any shout-outs or any last things you want to say?
Play more Blind Obedience and Touch the Spirit Realm. Those cards are insane.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you for letting us pick your brain a little bit, and thank you for watching. Also, a special thank you to our patrons, with a special shout out going to Flower, Turbote, Frenchie, and Bessa. Thank you so much. If you have the opportunity to give, then go ahead and check us out on Patreon. If not, if you enjoyed the content, leave a like, subscribe, join our Discord. We'd be happy to see you on game day.